Hi, meeting is being
everyone.
recorded.
That's a good morning. This is Kate K here from the AfghanEvac Resilience Working Group with another of our fireside chats. I am super excited to have my colleague here, Dr. Cynthia Mealer, and today we're going to be talking about grounding practices. So Cynthia, do you want to give yourself a little introduction?
Sure. Good morning. I am Cynthia Mealer. I'm a psychologist, a clinical psychologist by trade, and I have been in this business for quite a while. I do a lot of mindfulness training, meditation, grounding practices, Tai Chi, yoga, mind body, ways to help your mind and body integrated, and ways to get your parasympathetic nervous system online. So there's your sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, which we're all extremely familiar with. And then the opposite is your parasympathetic nervous system, rest, digest, heal. And most of these practices are things that really help that. So I'd encourage you to look into them after this.
Yeah. So when I first came to you with the idea for fireside chats, you were really excited, especially about this session about grounding practices. And it could just be me, but that was one of the first times that I had really heard of this term. So for somebody who's coming into this fresh, how would you explain what grounding practices are?
I would say grounding practices are a way to just bring your mind back to where you are right now, be here now, right? To just go from what we usually do in a stressful situation, which is our body's in one place, but our mind is in another. Maybe in that conversation we had this morning, maybe in the thing we're thinking about for this afternoon, maybe thinking about a presentation or a talk or a confrontation or a situation, but not where you are right now. And I think, our mind, body, and spirit came as a matched set. They do best together, giving them a chance to sync back up. You can think about these practices or even longer mind body practices as being a syncing station. Let's get everything back in one place and then
Yeah,
and then go from there.
yeah,
Sometimes I think about it like, we're all pretty clear that driving and texting is a bad idea because your mind isn't on your driving, right?
right.
So I would suggest to you that like walking your body around space without your mind is unlikely to go well.
Right. It's particularly helpful for our group because one of the things that I've heard a lot of is that people get stuck with these images or these conversations that they've had with our allies that are really painful. And of course, it's something that they carry around with them. But then when they try to set that boundary and go about their day-to-day lives, they really can't. So grounding
Mhm.
would also be helpful in that situation because it's an opportunity for us to say, hey, like we know that you had this experience or conversation or visual, but come back into this moment and it will help you
Mhm.
to sort of regulate yourself again, if that makes, is
Mhm.
that right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so sometimes it can be very simple. Like if you're in the middle of something, if you're trying to drive and you have these images in your head that are distracting you, or upsetting you, or if you're trying to do your regular job,
Right.
um, and you have these images coming in from all this amazing work that you're doing, and you can't focus. Um, then there are some different ways to handle it. If you're really feeling overwhelmed by the images and concepts, what I'd encourage you to do is to do kind of a brain dump
Okay.
and just write everything down. Like just write it all down and then put it to the side and come back to right now. Right. And sometimes
Interesting.
that's helpful.
Okay.
A lot of people do that before they go to sleep. It can be
Yes.
nice to just do a brain dump, all those things, so that when you lay down and it's like, all right, let me just come over and dump
Yeah.
that onto the
Yeah.
paper.
Put it somewhere.
And I might occasionally like grab my phone in the middle of the night and send myself an email so that I can go back to sleep without sitting there
Yeah.
thinking, I've got to remember to do that tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
But anything to just sort of get it out of your head and then move on to the next thing, which may be going to sleep or doing what you're doing in the moment. So that can be helpful. I'd also really encourage you if you're finding that that happens, find somebody to talk to. If you need help with that, feel free to reach out. Kate has my contact information. I'm more than happy to help you get hooked up. Psychology Today has a findatherapist.org
Yes.
where you can just get online and look at different profiles of different psychologists. Um, and other kinds of therapists just to get yourself someone it can be really helpful
Okay.
just to have someone to offload that with, even if you know all the things to do. Sometimes it just helps a little bit to get to talk about it.
Yeah. So here's my question. I know that there's a normal amount of just distraction in our day to day, right? Is there
Mhm.
sort of any guidance that you would have for our members that would say, okay, now you've sort of gotten to the point where you're having to do these grounding exercises a little bit too much, you're being pulled away a
Mhm.
little bit too much. Like, what would that look like for someone when they would say, okay, now I should be talking to someone?
Right. I think doing the grounding exercises, using what I would call mindfulness, just being in the present moment, doing practices to bring you back to the present moment. You can't do that too much.
Yeah.
That's always good, right?
Yeah.
Um, we all need that all the time. It's the nature of being human. I would say if you find yourself losing interest or pleasure or ability to do the things that you like to do in your life, if you notice you're not enjoying time with your partner, you're not really talking to your friends about the regular stuff you talk to your friends about anymore, like at all. Um, when your kids come over and want to cuddle or play, you're kind of pushing them away.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, if you find that you're just not taking pleasure in the normal things and it's interfering with your life. So maybe with activities of daily living, you're finding like that the things you normally do, you're just
Mhm.
not really up to. Maybe you're letting some bills slide, or you're not showering, or you're not keeping your house the way you normally do. And I'm not saying you have to be like a perfectly clean house. That's not at all what I mean, right? But if it's kind of like not up to your personal, like even on a bad day standards,
Yeah.
just starting to notice those things. Those are
Okay.
signs like, yeah, let's get some help pretty quickly. But with this
I-
work you're doing, I'd really encourage you to think about just getting some help. Um, and there may be some resources just for some pro bono work that people are doing too. There are a lot of networks out there.
yeah.
We're about to go in July. The new suicide hotline for everyone, or crisis line, will be 988, I think, starting
Okay.
July 16th.
That's amazing.
And that's just a way to call people and have someone trained to talk to just right now.
Right.
And that can be really helpful.
Right. We have set up an informal peer-to-peer network that's being pretty widely used, but the challenge with that, of course, is that we're not trained. We're empathetic, but we're not necessarily trained. And I find that when I first started this work, the challenge that I had most was repetitive thinking. So it was
Mm-hmm.
really obsessive when I was thinking about the same thing over and over,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't really figure out a way to come back into the present just because
Mm-hmm.
it was the same thing that kept coming back. So you've mentioned, okay, the brain dump,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah.
just if for anyone, it doesn't have to be a big journal entry. Like it doesn't have to be a beautiful piece. Like you can just jot
Right.
down whatever is happening and it puts it
Mm-hmm.
somewhere else. I think, we're a group that's looking for fast, fast
Right.
assistance. So
Sometimes
it
it's
doesn't
a
have
red
to
and
be,
black crayon that you
yeah, exactly,
just
exactly. Just put it somewhere. That's as long as you understand it. So what other methods other than the brain dump would you recommend?
I think there's some for like, I'm acutely uncomfortable, right? And there are some things you can do there. And I'm actually going to slide back and stand up because this is easier to do standing up.
Okay.
And so what you might want to do is just like think about taking with your hands and just grabbing all your stress with a big inhale. Throw it away. And just do that 3 or 4 times.
Okay.
That really can reset your nervous system.
Okay.
If you have the ability to go upside down, right? If you can either
Interesting.
if you have a handstand or a headstand practice, if you have one of those little headstand chairs, or if you just want to lay back over the arm of the couch, right? Just lean back
Yeah, okay.
and put yourself in a little back bend. Think about what that does to babies, right? It settles them down right away. It resets your
Mm-hmm.
nervous system a little bit. So that's a quick way to do
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Another one is to really just touch your body,
Okay.
right? Appropriately for wherever you are, right?
That's smart.
Maybe just touch your fingertips to your thumb. Like it's a
Okay.
neuropsych test, but meanwhile, it takes enough concentration that you have to think about it just a little.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just kind of rubbing your hands together or patting your legs. Maybe if you're in a situation where you need to be quieter and less weird than that, then you just like notice what's supporting you.
Okay.
Like right now, the floor is supporting my feet. The chair is supporting my legs and my hips and my back. My arms and hands are supported on my lap. Just noticing where that support is. And then maybe just noticing what position are you in? Can you get 1% more comfortable? I'm a little sideways. Let me see if I can just straighten up a little bit. Oh, I'm doing that Gollum thing, typing again. Let me see if I can get myself situated. Maybe then I just notice my breathing, not trying to change it, but just notice it. If you're still having trouble, if your breathing's kind of not enough, your breathing's a good go-to because it's always, always there. You don't need an app. You don't need internet connection. You don't need any equipment. You don't need anything to work. Just noticing your breathing is very powerful. You can decide if you want to also do breathing exercises, and there are millions of those that you can do. And I think we're going to do another talk about some things like that.
Yes.
But just noticing your breathing is plenty. Seeing where you can feel the air, maybe if you notice the temperature of the air on your nostrils or your lips, just that. Be fascinated by your breath and where you can feel it. Another way to do it is to kind of look around you and say, okay, let me engage all my senses. What are some things that I can see? What can I touch? What can I smell? What can I taste? Oh, that nice stale coffee from earlier, right? What can I hear? And let yourself just be fully engaged in the moment.
So it's not necessarily about trying to change what your body is doing. It's more just the act of trying to take notice of it that will kind of pull you back into that moment. I'm glad that you mentioned the things you can see and things you can hear, because that's something that my doctor had said to me when I first started having anxiety. And I really struggled with it for some reason because I'd get really overloaded. So if I was in a place where I was anxious, it was usually when I was within a crowd, and I'd say, well, what can you see? And I'd be like, thousands of people. So I had to kind of get into the mode of like, okay, that's not the right grounding exercise for me. So I would encourage everyone to know that, there's some things that will work based on the context, and like, feel free to explore. But the whole purpose is really just to get out of that mindset and sort of focus on what's with you.
Right.
Okay.
And what I might encourage is, like, if you're in a crowd and you're feeling a little overwhelmed, go with Mr. Rogers, look for the helpers. Like, find how many people do you see smiling? How many people do you see hugging?
Interesting.
Where do you see, and maybe have some ideas in your head to go with of like, what would be comforting to me? What's my favorite color? Where can I find my favorite color?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Do I hear any birds? Do I hear a chime? What am I listening for? Maybe specifically.
My grounding exercise, when I first started having these really bad anxiety attacks, I would text someone and I would say, I thought that would be sufficient. And I noticed that a lot of my friends who had anxiety started doing that exact thing. They were like, well, tell me the things that you could see. So I also sort of needed that intermediary in the beginning. But after a while, it became a little bit more natural to me to sit down and say, okay, like, this is the moment that I should be in. Now, is a grounding exercise something that you would say, hey, maybe you should just do it just for the upkeep of it? Or is it something where it's like, you should only pull this out when you're really struggling?
No, you should do it a lot, right?
Okay.
Like, get in the habit of doing it, because then you won't need it, right? Anything with your parasympathetic nervous system. So anything that settles you a little bit in any way. And I would put in that category grounding, mindfulness, meditation, Tai Chi, yoga, stretching, laughing, so many things, right? The more you do it, the more you're working out, you're toning your parasympathetic nervous system. It's way easier than your musculoskeletal system. You don't need 2 hours at the gym, right? A minute here and there. If while you're waiting for Outlook to load, you make it a practice to just breathe and just shut your eyes and breathe. If you want to make a personal timer, set a timer for 1 minute and see how many breaths you take, just normal breaths, right? And then you have a personal, like, mindfulness timer or grounding practice timer where you can just shut your eyes and take 5 breaths, 16 breaths, however many breaths you normally take in a minute. And it's only going to be about a minute. So maybe when you start your car, maybe when you arrive at a destination, maybe while you're stuck in traffic. Those are all great times to do these things kind of as maintenance, because if you turn your parasympathetic nervous system on periodically, it comes on easier.
Okay. So it's really a matter of practice makes perfect.
It is. And it doesn't take a lot. That's the really interesting thing.
Right.
This is not these are not things that you have to do for an hour a day.
Right.
I don't know about you, but I'm up to about 800 things that I should do for an hour a day for optimal health and well-being. I have no answer for that. So
right.
my specialty is, how can I give you something that's like under 15 minutes?
Right.
that
that's exactly what this community is looking for. The other one that I used to do that I really struggled with so bad at first, and I got much better at it the more I practiced, but my doctor said you have to go through and pay attention to each part of your body, start with your feet, and intentionally relax it. And then you go all the way up, and hopefully by the end your body is relaxed. But I was realizing that I would relax it and then I would tense it back up as I got into each part. And so it took like actual months before I could do it. And then I would check back in with myself 5 minutes later and be like, okay, like now we're at a place where it's seeming to stick. So that one was really helpful.
A small alternate way to do that, right? Because you can do a body scan as a relaxation exercise, but you can also do it as a mindfulness or a grounding practice where you're just noticing.
Right.
Oh, that's really tight. Do you feel like softening? Hey, shoulders, do you feel like softening? No, not so much. Okay.
Yeah. They're just in it.
No judgment, right? But just the act of noticing it is helpful without maybe the failure of, gosh, I can't get that knot out of my shoulder right now.
Right. So this might be a silly question, but I'm hearing mindfulness and I'm hearing grounding exercises. And is there a difference between the two of them?
I mean, obviously it depends on who you ask. Neither one is a set term that has a specific definition that everyone would agree on. I would say yes, very much the same. And then there are many levels, because I think mindfulness at the heart, John Kabat-Zinn would say, mindfulness is being aware of the present moment without judgment, right? Like just noticing how things are without trying to change them. Another way to say that is living your life like it actually matters. Because what do we do with things that matter, right? We pay attention to them. And I think just that act of paying attention to like where I am. And I'd really, really encourage you to be aware of where you are and be aware of what's good. We find a moment, see if you can find a moment every day where you're like, oh, this is nice. Because it's so the nature of human beings to be like, oh, if it were a little warmer, if it were a little cooler, a little sweeter, a little bit different.
Right.
But maybe it's really great just the way it is.
Right.
And letting yourself like put down all that mental chatter to just go, oh, this is nice.
Right.
Let me not miss it. Let me not miss my life, right? Because that's not doing anybody any good. And it means that you can't sustain all the amazing things that you're doing. So don't miss your life in the idea of service to others' lives. Because while you can make their lives much better from a better place.
I think that's going to resonate with our crowd a lot. We seem to have a lot of guilt sometimes when we do these intentional things to pull ourselves out of those moments, because we never want to feel like we're abandoning our allies, right? But what I'm asking people to do, or what we're asking is to take a minute, because we can't really do our best work unless we are feeling our best. And I think that's the piece that kind of gets missing is we're so willing to skip over that part in service of others. And we forget that service to ourselves.
Right? Let me call you on that fallacy. It feels like it's in service to others to skip over ourselves. But the reality is that just means that you have a much shorter time to be able to do the good work that you're doing, right? It means that you're going to miss things. You're going to be more irritable. And others may include, first world or not, right? Others include the people in your life here who maybe you're a little snappy with or don't have time for or whatever because you're overwhelmed. Like, that's not helpful either, right? They count too. And you count too.
Yep.
And so in that idea that we all matter. Everybody, even you.
Yeah, we need the reminder.
And I think if you do it thinking in terms of like, hey, I want to be able to do this for a long time. And I want to be a model to the other people doing it, that you can do this without taking yourself out. You can absolutely live a good, full, happy life and be of great service to others. It can be sustainable. I think that's huge, right? The other thing you might consider is when you're talking to your partners, undoubtedly they are also experiencing distress. Show them some of these things that you're learning. Do it with them. Then you get to do it and they get to do it. Double benefit.
Yeah. All right. So Cynthia, we're almost at the end of our time, but I did want to ask, we've done some of the exercises, like those tangible things that our listeners can do. So we've done the brain dump and the breathing exercises, and I really like the throwing of that one. I like.
Throwing everything away.
Is there any other like favorite of yours that you would say to this group that this is something else that you can keep in mind?
I am a big fan of breathing exercises, and I think we'll be actually filming one of those next week. Is I think what we have on the schedule. So I'll leave those for then. But I would just say, just notice your breathing, and then maybe play with it a little bit. If you're trying to kind of wake up and be a little more alert, breathe a little faster. Maybe even like, if you're trying to slow things down or settle yourself a little bit, maybe you want to inhale and then exhale longer than you inhale. Maybe you want to think about breathing like, nose to knees, just kind of starting with like, see how much air you can get in your torso, right? And hold it for a second and then exhale all the way out. You can do that if you have trouble doing that, which a lot of people do when they're stressed. You can think about doing it like a bellows for a fire. Just kind of breathe in and then breathe out, actually physically crunch the air out of you. And those things can be helpful. But honestly, these are such simple things. Don't overthink it. Don't make it harder than it is. Just sit and notice your breathing. Maybe right now, just notice the next 3 breaths.
I'm doing it as you're saying it. I can feel myself. My trick is I'm very music oriented. And so when I first started trying to do these grounding exercises, I picked a song that had a beat that would help me calm my heart rate down. And so that's the thing that I always go back to. And it's actually been really helpful. It makes it easy.
That's a great idea. There's a good old song by Alabama that you can look up on YouTube really quick. It's just called "I'm in a Hurry and Don't Know Why." It's a great song.
I feel that. I'll listen to that after for sure.
I consider that a mindfulness anthem.
Yeah. That's perfect. We encourage everyone here to choose their own, whatever makes you feel empowered, but also present, guys. All right. So we are at the end of our session. The last question that we like to ask all of our guests is, if you could leave any of our viewers with one message, what would it be?
It doesn't have to be hard. Your body and mind and spirit were built to work together, right? Your parasympathetic nervous system is right there. Your breath is always with you. This is not something to challenge yourself with. This is not something to do perfect. The thing that you do is so much better than the perfect thing you don't do. Just notice your breathing. That's all it takes, right? And then if you want to go on and find other things and tips and tricks and build skills and all that, great. But right now, just breathe. You're doing it anyway. Just notice. It's okay.
That's really smart. It's like the tools you need are just like, they're there with you guys. Like that's all you got to focus on. Perfect. Well, Cynthia, thank you so much for doing this first session with us. I'm really excited to do the breathing exercises next week. I'll come ready.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to stop recording now. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you.